Okay, for those of you who haven't heard, there is a woman named Nicole Ryan that hired a hitman to kill her ex-husband, Michael Ryan. The problem is that the hitman she hired to off her husband was an undercover RCMP officer. So Nicole Ryan was, obviously charged with hiring a hitman and attempted murder and whatever charges go with hiring a hitman. So that's fine and dandy. She went on trial, and that's when she starts saying that her husband was a bully. That he used to laugh and put a gun to her head, and he'd punch holes in walls and just generally beat her up and whatnot. The problem with this is she's lying completely. Now, I had vaguely heard, the name Nicole Ryan, and that she'd hired an RCMP officer to off her husband. And that's all I'd ever heard. I don't watch the news. I find it too depressing. I read, the most important news stories. Excuse me. My larynx is slightly bruised. Anyway, when I'm laying in bed at night, I read the news on my iPhone, what is it? It's a smartphone. Oh, I have no idea. My husband bought it for me. I hate the thing. I hate technology. Oh. Anyway, the point is that I vaguely, passed over my head, no recollection whatsoever, couldn't care less. Anyway, the woman was found innocent. She was acquitted. I think that means the same thing. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, she was acquitted and went on her merry way. The problem is like I said, she's lying. She's completely lying. I heard her speak on, I believe it was CBC1 the other day. And she spoke in a monotone. She sounded like every word that came out of her mouth was rehearsed. Within the first few seconds of listening to this woman's story, my psychic sense, if you will, started tingling and like buzzers went off in my head like, this woman is completely full of baloney. This woman is completely lying. There is no truth in what she's saying at all. Well, this is exactly what her ex-husband is now saying. Apparently what happened, well, first of all, the courts never wanted to hear his side of the story. He was listed as a witness every day he went to court. Every day he had to sit outside the courtroom because as a witness you can't hear other witnesses testify because that could taint your testification and blah blah blah. So every day he sat in his car in the court parking lot with his cell phone waiting to be called in to testify and give his side of the story. He was never called. This is his side of the story, okay? Him and his wife, they had difficult times because of her family. Her family was a bit too controlling, and she kind of cut herself off from them in an attempt to save her marriage. And now she claims that he's the one that cut them off from her family because he was abusive and controlling, but he claims it was her idea, which I can see. I know a couple very similar to these people. Now that I've kind of read his side of the story, I've kind of followed up on her side of the story, I can kind of see similarities between this couple, the Ryans, and another couple that I know, the Amrites. So, I shouldn't have said their name, but whatever. Anywho, so he says that she decided to kind of step away from her family in an attempt to save their marriage. Well, it didn't work. And they ended up separating, both living in a separate property that the family owned. That was fine and dandy, I guess, for 2 years or so. They, they were friendly with each other. They were friends. They may not have been married friends anymore, but they were friends. Well, one day she says to him, have you ever thought about coming back and trying again? And he says, no. In fact, I prefer divorce. Well, that's when she started calling the police on a regular basis, saying, my husband is stalking me. My husband is stalking me. And they would call him and find that he was home, at his home, 200 kilometers away. So there's no way that between the time Mrs. Ryan hung up, complaining that her husband was outside stalking her, and Mr. Ryan picks up at home 2 hours away, there's no way. There's no way he could have gone from her home to his home in that short period of time. So it's very evident that at least some of the phone calls she was making to the RCMP were fabricated in order to make her husband, ex-husband, look guilty of stalking. The police told her on several occasions that she was exaggerating what she was saying about her husband and that she should calm down. Now, according to Mrs. Ryan, the police completely ignored her. She had no other choice. She had to kill her husband. Mr. Ryan goes on to say how once it became very evident that the police would not listen to her claims that she was being stalked, she started saying that Mr. Ryan was threatening to burn down her house with her and her children inside. Sorry, I think they only have one child. But the point being that he was threatening to burn the house down with her and their child inside. And it goes on and on and on. This woman is clearly insane. Now, to further back up Mr. Ryan's side of the story, a psychologist examined both parents during a custody trial and found that Mrs. Ryan was mentally unfit to take care of her daughter, that her emotional state was not conducive to a positive home environment for their child. So simply put, the woman's too fucking crazy, excuse my language, to raise their child. And the child was given full custody to Mr. Ryan, who now lives in Ontario with his new wife and their young son. Their daughter is happier. She's come out of her shell. She's a wonderful big sister to her half-brother. It's all peachy keen. But Mrs. Ryan still claims that her husband is a psychopath, horrible person, etc., etc., etc. So there you have it. That is what's going on with this case in Nova Scotia with Nicole Ryan. Oh, and the Supreme Court of Canada has overthrown her acquittal, which I guess means that the courts may have another go at convicting her for attempted murder and whatnot, which is good, because hopefully this time Mr. Ryan will have a chance to testify and tell his side of the story, because you really can't convict a person in the media, and that's what's happened. Mr. Ryan has been convicted in the media of being an abusive husband and a real SOB, and it just may not be true. So hopefully he will get to testify at a new court hearing, and we'll finally get to the bottom of this case, because I'm now kind of hooked on it. I want to see how this all turns out, because like I said, I have friends, acquaintances that it's a very similar situation. Her family is very controlling. He wants to kind of pull away, etc., etc. Like, so anyway, that's the story, and hopefully it'll all work out for the best, and the truth will come out. Okay, so thank you for watching.